Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today on managing anxiety and coping with COVID-19. We're really excited to bring this topic to you. I know a lot of folks have been at home for several weeks now. You may be home alone, you may be home with your animals, your pets, your family, and it's a different world. It's a different day. And so in BizLaunch, we're all coping in different ways in Arlington County and around the world. And we were talking with a great friend and client of BizLaunch, Dr. Christina Tripathi, who is a clinical psychologist. And she thought that it would be a great idea if we did a webinar in just how to cope and how to manage and how to build and work together as units in a different world. And interestingly enough, it's not something that we've ever experienced before. I know personally, I never thought that this was something that I'd be going through in my lifetime. And so a lot of my activities the first week was and then the second week it was and today it's So I believe this is timely. And we're really pleased to be able to bring this webinar to you all today. And we're hoping that at the end of this, you'll be able to get some nuggets of information that can help you manage anxiety, which I'm sure we all have. I know I have. And to be able to use some new tools in the toolkit to manage your business, to manage your family in a very positive way. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christina. Also want to say we're going to take a lot of Q&A at the end, so please ask your questions in the chat box. And so here we go, managing anxiety and coping with COVID-19. Christina.
Thank you, Tara, so much for that introduction, and thank you to everybody at Arlington Economic Development for having me here today to talk about this topic. I hope you are all staying well, staying healthy, and my goal for today is for you to be able to take away some concrete, practical things that you can begin to implement into your everyday life to hopefully help reduce your stress and anxiety so that you can better help those around you as well. As Tara mentioned, this is a time of unprecedented change, uncertainty, and rapid shift. The shifts that we are experiencing are not just day to day, week to week, they are at times even hour to hour, moment to moment. And so again, I hope that you're able to take away some information that you can implement beginning today. So Tara, if you could kindly go to the next slide, please. And the next one, thank you guys. I do want to begin by saying a very heartfelt thank you to all of our healthcare professionals and individuals working tirelessly on the front lines. I know that all of us send our collective thanks and gratitude for everything that you are doing to keep us healthy and safe during this time. All right, Tara, thank you. All right, so let's just take a moment before we jump into talking about actual practical solutions and strategies that we can implement to support your anxiety in your daily life. I want to take a moment to just reflect on the fact that the need to implement these strategies is immediate and really will be ongoing throughout the duration of COVID-19. Many of us right now are still in fight or flight mode, which I'm sure is a term that many of you have heard before. But essentially what this is, it is that our bodies have responded rapidly to a perceived stressor, a real stressor in this instance, and our anxiety is spiking. And we are trying rapidly to figure out how to adjust, how to cope, and are only perhaps now beginning to fall into some semblance of a routine. And for that reason, taking time to implement mindfulness daily is going to be absolutely essential to help you begin to lower that overall baseline of anxiety as we start to settle into this new normal. And so really what I want all of us to start to do, myself included, I am following this advice, is to plan on prioritizing time daily that we can focus on our own mindfulness and on our own wellness. So let's begin a little bit by focusing on things that we as adults can implement into our daily lives, ways that we can manage our stress overall. The first thing starts out with identifying a time every day that you can devote to focusing on your own mindfulness or wellness or stress reduction practice. So a lot of what I'm hearing from my patients and from people in my life right now, and I know that I am certainly experiencing, is that we don't have these big blocks of time right now to always devote to this or focus on this. And so what I would like to focus on instead is finding just moments or minutes, either certain times throughout the day or even once a day, to implement something very simple that just gives you a break from taking on all of the information that we're hearing. So think of things like meditating or doing a guided meditation if just regular meditation feels a bit too abstract or too much for you right now. Even journaling, exercising, and even having some unstructured alone time, which I know for many of us at home with our families right now or with young children is at a premium. So anything that you can do to implement that time throughout the day is going to be very, very helpful, even if it's just a few minutes a day. Something else that you may wish to consider doing is limiting your media exposure. So right now we are all being inundated with a lot of information from various news outlets online, on TV. Our phones are going off with notifications all day. And of course, the media has to do their job to keep us well informed because, again, the situation is shifting day to day, moment to moment. But at the same time, if you begin to feel like that is elevating your level of stress or that that has become too much for you, you should certainly begin to implement some boundaries around that. So, for example, something that I know I have done, that my patients have done, is begin to check the news at certain times throughout the day. So perhaps you're checking once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and once in the evening. Or perhaps you're checking at a time of day that you know you might be a bit more available to get some fact-based information. Just keep an eye on how you're about it, know when it begins to feel too much. Now, in that same vein, you may also want to consider limiting how much you're talking about COVID-19 with your friends and your family. So certainly all of us right now have a need to reach out to those around us, to those that we are close with, to begin to process and discuss everything that's happening. And at the same time, please be aware if it's starting to cause you increased levels of stress and anxiety to be talking about it, ruminating about it, or focusing on it too much throughout the day. And if that is the case, feel free to put in place a boundary and to let your friends know, let your family know, yes, I'm here to support you. Yes, I'm here to listen, but right now I need to focus on something else. And can we please come back to this at another time? Now, a few more positive solutions that we could also focus on include beginning to shift our thoughts from the negative over to more of the positive takeaway points here. And of course, there are so many difficult and stressful things for us to be focusing on during this time. But we also have an opportunity to gain some more control over our thoughts and to temporarily shut off that more negative channel and switch the channels in our thinking to something a bit more positive. And so something that has worked very well for a lot of people is to begin to focus on gratitude. Because even with everything that is going on right now, there really are very many opportunities for us to focus on some things in our immediate lives that we are thankful for. So perhaps it means focusing on gratitude for our health, for our family, for a roof over our heads, for the essentials, the basics that many of us are so fortunate to have during this time. But whatever gratitude looks like to you, take time throughout the day to focus on it, to think about it, because you're not only giving thanks and shifting towards something more positive, you're also starting to tune out a little bit of that negative runaway line of thinking that can cause a spike in your anxiety. Now, in that same vein, you may also want to start to reach out to friends and family to socialize virtually. I know a lot of us are feeling very disconnected and lonely right now, but fortunately, we live in a time where we have different ways of connecting with each other virtually. And so perhaps you might want to consider implementing family game nights, virtual game nights with your friends. A lot of people have been doing happy hours. I've seen lots of shots of that on social media. And those sorts of connections right now are vital because they're giving us a break, but they're also allowing us to maintain that social connection during this time, which is also absolutely essential to our overall well-being. And then lastly, if none of these more practical solutions seem to be helping, or others that you may have tried, you may want to consider reaching out to a mental health professional. Pretty much all psychologists and mental health professionals have switched over to full-time telemedicine and are able to connect with you virtually, and many are still taking new patients. So if at any point you feel like the anxiety is getting to be too much, it's interfering with your daily functioning, your ability to focus on your work, to be there for your family, or that you find yourself ruminating or obsessing over some of the concerns, that's really a good time to reach out. So I do want to shift now and talk a little bit about two other specific groups, which are parents and families. And I think it goes without saying that many of us are feeling a significant amount of stress that we've had to adjust to very rapidly and without really having had any time to reflect. And this is this new reality that we are taking on 3 new roles simultaneously. And those roles are, we are working from home, many of us, we are also parenting, and we are also working as supervisors of our child's education. And for many of us, I know tuning in today, we are also still trying to manage our businesses, keep our businesses afloat, and also provide for our contractors and our employees. And so this feeling of overwhelm, this very new feeling of I can't manage all of this is very normal. And the first thing to start with is just by discussing that traditionally, these are different roles that are not meant to overlap in our everyday, day-to-day lives. And many of us are not used to having them overlap. There's a reason we have structures in place like childcare, for example, or that our children go to school so that we can kind of focus on these things individually. So I want to start out by saying, overall, lower any expectations that you have for yourself about being perfectionistic in these areas, or feeling as if you have to be perfect in all of them. This is really not the time to do that. Right now is just the time to focus on your self-care, ensuring the care and safety of those around you, and just doing the best that you can, knowing that this is temporary. So beginning by talking about some things that parents can do. As parents, something we really want to try to do right now is to model to the best of our ability good coping skills for our children, because our children of all ages are watching how we are responding to the stressors that are taking place day to day. And so as much as it is within your power, you want to model having a good response, having a good sense of calm, and also to take it a step further, perhaps even sharing with your children the different things that you're implementing to take care of yourself. And so by sharing with them what you are doing to take care of yourself, you're not only introducing a different concept to them that they can hopefully then take on and implement for themselves, you can also then help them put in place something that works for them. And it becomes a bit more supportive in that way as well. Something else you may want to be prepared for as a parent is to have factual information about COVID-19. Children, adolescents are getting information from lots of different places. Sometimes the news is on all day in the background, and we as adults aren't even aware of that. So children might be hearing information from their friends, from the internet, from all these different sources, and they may not know how to make sense of it. And especially given their developmental age and stage, you want to be aware of how much is appropriate for them to take in. The strong advice I have right now about this is to keep your information factual, keep it concrete, and keep it brief, all the while ensuring their immediate safety and emphasizing the temporary nature of the situation. And also, as we talked about before, there is an opportunity here to focus on the positive. So again, helping your children to shift their thinking from how difficult the adjustment has been and how much they're missing friends and things like that, to saying, you know, this is a temporary moment in time, and we can do things like have more time together as a family. Perhaps we can do more projects or spend more time together outdoors, and this will eventually come to an end. But for the duration, there are things that we can do to shift our thinking collectively towards more of a positive outlook. Now, with that in mind, there are also some very practical things that families can do to support overall mindfulness and wellness at this time. We talked a little bit before about the shift towards focusing on gratitude at the individual level, but there's also some things that you can implement at the family level. Something, for example, that may work well for your family is having everybody daily write down something that they're grateful for or that they're feeling thankful for, and put it in a bowl, put it in a jar, just put it somewhere that you can all sort of access. And then at the end of the week, take a look at everything you have all written down. And so this exercise accomplishes two things. the first thing it accomplishes is that it sort of forces us daily to have that time for introspection and reflection, to actually document or write down something that we're feeling grateful for. But at the end of the week, when the family gets together to review everything, it's also helping us all to engage in some structured, mindful, reflective family time, which can also help with bringing us all a greater sense of calm and, of course, an overall sense of gratitude. Something I'm sure you've also been hearing a lot is how important exercise is right now. Exercise is absolutely essential to help us fight off all of those stress hormones and chemicals that are surging in our bodies right now. And this is absolutely something you can do as a family as well. So find time to take walks together outdoors. There are a lot of different, exercise routines and workouts and things like that you can access online. But prioritizing time to get well physically together may also be helpful. And then lastly, I know we've been talking a lot about the focus on family together time and the positive of that, but I think I would be remiss to note that after a while, it is possible that we can all start to go a bit stir crazy, and that also many of us are not used to being together all of the time. And so something we all actually may need is a bit more unstructured downtime or alone time. And so right now, with everybody's schedules kind of overlapping and everybody kind of being together all the time, that may be a challenge. So something that you might want to consider doing is sitting down as a family and having a family meeting and identifying time when you can all give each other a bit of quiet or downtime so that you can all spend that time that you're together more meaningfully. Okay. So I think now what I would like to do, if it still works for folks, is pause for some questions and answers. I just want to make sure that we do have enough time for that portion of the presentation today. But I do have some more information here that we can come back to or that we can send out later on specific anxiety management strategies for teens and adolescents and also for younger children. And I also have some information at the end of the presentation with resources such as books and websites that you may want to consider looking into as well.
Christina, I think on the questions, and I'm going to pop in here real quick, on the questions that on the slide prior, one of the things that I was wondering, and I know a lot of people are dealing with, is it's hard to get the alone time, but also like disagreements that you may have within the family. Whereas before there's time and there's space and you can get away from a situation to reflect and then to come back to talk about it. Now, because we're all kind of home together, how do you handle that in a structured way rather than people just getting mad and slamming doors and
So this is going to really depend on what the structure of your family looks like. So assuming right now that you're parenting with a partner or somebody else in the house, it's really going to start at the parental level with how to implement that structure. Meaning that you on your own, if you're a single parent, will have to sit down and look at the family schedule and identify time where you first are able to give yourself breaks, and then provide breaks for your child. And if you do have somebody that you are parenting with and you have a partner in the house, it begins with the two of you sitting down and looking at how your work schedules are overlapping, and then identifying that time first and foremost for yourselves, because we can't pour from an empty cup, and we have to make sure that we as the adults in this situation are feeling as though we're able to support our children. And that's not going to work unless we take that time first. And I know oftentimes that can feel selfish, but right now it's absolutely essential. So I would say use this sort of top-down approach where the adults identify that time first, if it's possible, and then start to identify when their kids can have those breaks as well.
Oh, that's great. Because I think because of COVID came and the way how it happened, the pandemic started, we were all managing status quo, and then it became, oh my gosh, and then it, for me with juggling work and trying to be a teacher, the time, that alone time has kind of disappeared. I would say it doesn't exist. I find that I'm working harder now than I was when I was at work and we had these separations of time.
Absolutely. So
And
Tara,
so,
oh, go ahead. You just broke up a little bit there, but the question?
oh, the question was pretty much, how do we as parents and people that are working or have businesses, how do we break up our day in a
Right.
great way that we're spending time with our children, we're able to juggle without it overtaking our entire lives?
So I'm going to answer this question in two parts, because before we talk about the practical ways to do that, I want to talk a little bit about how to organize first our anxiety about the current situation that we're in.
Yes,
And
yes.
something I've been talking a lot with my patients about, and even just, friends and family in my everyday life, is that the worries that we have about COVID-19 are unique in the sense that they are they're happening at many different levels. We are worried globally. We are worried about our communities, our families, and then have worries that exist for ourselves. And
Yes.
so it really begins with starting to get organized about what you are worrying in what capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So sitting down with yourself and actually writing out what you're worried about, and then kind of putting it in these boxes about, is this a worry that I have for myself? Is this a worry I have for my family, for my business, for society at large? And then starting to identify the things that are within your control and that you can have some impact on, and putting the rest to the side is a really, really good place to start. Because otherwise
Nice.
it's just this stream of worry and anxiety in our head that feels overwhelming and makes us feel powerless within the situation. So I would say start by organizing your worries. And then in
Okay.
terms of organizing your day, it absolutely begins with prioritizing what is the most essential. And for most of us right now, the very difficult choices we're having to make is that, for those of us with families, with children, is that we really have to make sure that they are set up first
Mm-hmm.
before we get into the work part of it. And that can be a challenge. In my experience so far, talking to folks, work seems to be, people seem to be understanding and flexible. But I would
Yes.
say start by scheduling the family things first, identifying when your kids are going to be doing their online learning. Or if you have, as many of us are, and I am certainly in this category, children who are under the age of 4 and not yet in school, who is going to be watching and providing childcare while your partner is working, and then when you guys can shift. So start with the family piece first, and then try to build work around that if at all possible.
That sounds good, because I felt like with the distance learning and with making sure, and teachers were trying their best to get us information, and I'm like, oh my God, I wish I was a teacher because I don't know what to do. And I think, you know, and you and I had chatted about it, because I felt as if I was putting pressure on myself to be like this perfect parent. But then the reality is we've got to work through it and design structure.
Yes, I think that, yeah, that is such a valid point, and we are all feeling that right now. And so it really just begins with identifying what is within your control and what can you bring organization and focus to now, but really letting go of any expectation that you have about this going 100% perfectly, and just really managing expectations around it.
That's right. That's right. Because I think once you realize that, or you take away that kind of burden, then it makes it, I felt like a sense of relief after I talked to you, actually, because I was like, what do I do? And then once I got that anxiety and kind of put it in its place, I could then free myself up, work with my husband, figure out, how our day was going to be structured. And it really did give us a sense more of that pressure was off.
Yes. And I'm happy to hear that too, because it also speaks to this other point about work, which is that as much as we all wanted to just dive into our new telework situations, really what we have to do first is manage the anxiety and put the structure in place so that we can deal with this for the duration, and we're not just dealing with hour, moment to moment. And it involves, I know on my end, a lot of nightly planning where we're looking at the schedule for the next day, because with, the way that I work, that shifts a bit more than it does for my husband. And that's a new thing that we both had to take on, right? We're kind of used to having our schedules, but before we can dive into work and dive into scheduling everything that needs to be done for ourselves professionally, We have to really make sure that we have the time in place to do that.
To be able to keep that.
Yeah.
And I think too, if we could go through some of these other questions as well, or slides that you have, I think it would be really, because I know you talk about teens and adolescents and younger kids, and I'm curious to, I think the audience is also curious to hear that as well.
Sure, absolutely. So then, if it works, let's start with a slide about adolescents. And talk a little bit about this the very unique challenges that this age group is going through. Particularly for a lot of our graduating seniors right now, I know many of us feel, particularly worried about that population because there's a lot of loss there, a lot of milestones that are getting either moved around, shifted, or are just not going to be happening, like graduation or college visitation days or things of that nature. So I think with adolescents, right now, the first thing we really want to do is just validate, and support the new situation that they are in. And to be aware of the fact that their emotional reactions to this may vary. They may be okay with it for a little while, and then feelings of frustration and anger and irritability can emerge a bit later on. We're in week 3 of this now, so we're starting to see a little bit more of that as the honeymoon effect of kind of having the distance learning in place is wearing off a bit. So just let your student know that you're there for them for the duration if they do want to check in and talk. You also want to provide support and structure for distance learning. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where I was saying before we can even put in place a structure and a schedule for our own work that we need to do, we need to make sure that our children are set up for the distance learning requirements on their end and prioritize that if at all possible. So helping them identify a place in the house to work, helping them understand and access the technology to do so, even though a lot of them are joking with me that they understand it better than their parents. You still want to ensure that that fluidity is there so they can access what it is that they need to be doing. You also want to take some time to encourage them to socialize with their peers, because a lot of what our children are missing right now, particularly our older children and adolescents, are their extracurricular activities, are the social aspects that come along with going to school every day. And so you want to help them and encourage them to put structures in place where they're checking in with their friends virtually every day, every week, and also doing so in a way that's not just, having a chat about a classroom lesson that's going on. And again, if you start to feel as though their emotional response to this is too intense or getting out of hand, or it's impacting their daily functioning, meaning that they're unable to communicate effectively with you, it's impacting their sleep, their eating, their overall mood, it might be a good time to seek out some mental health support for them as well. So we can talk about children on the next slide as well. So with younger children, we're going to do a lot of what I just talked about, but shift it around a little bit. A lot of what our younger children need right now, first and foremost, is reassurance about their immediate safety and their immediate situation, and to understand that this is temporary. So having statements ready to talk to them, such as, this is a temporary situation and we are all safe here at home, and just reminding them that this is going to go back to normal eventually, will be very reassuring for them. You also really want to provide them with developmentally appropriate information. So while your teenagers and adolescents may have more understanding about what this looks like globally and be more interested in the scientific ways that we are beginning to combat COVID-19, your younger children really just need to understand that right now there's an illness or a germ or a virus. Children are all familiar with those phrases. That is going on, and we just have to protect ourselves a little bit more, and that just means staying home for a little bit longer than we're usual. And this will go back to normal, but for right now, we're just going to kind of hang out at home more, and you are safe. And using that kind of language to help support that. So just also you want to keep an eye on how much information your child is accessing, what they're hearing on the news, what they're hearing from friends, because you don't have total control over that. And just be prepared that they may come to you with some difficult questions, and you want to be able to answer those, again, concisely and with factual information. There are also a lot of workbooks and activity books available for purchase, and I list some of them at the end, that have structured activities around ways to enhance mindfulness and manage stress in children. And so these are also wonderful because these books tend to be written by mental health professionals and really include evidence-based solutions, strategies, and interventions for how to support children during this time. And it's also really helpful because it provides a concrete, clear structure for parents who may not know how to approach their children's worries. So you may want to say, hey, why don't we take a look at some of the activities in this workbook, and perhaps you do one a day. Most of them generally take anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes to accomplish. And again, same as our older children, if you feel that your child's level of irritability, engagement or disengagement, overall mood, eating, sleeping, or daily functioning is being impacted in any way, it would be time to reach out to a mental health professional and start some sessions. Okay. So here's just a page with some resources. Some of those books that I mentioned are listed on this slide, but of course, if you go onto Amazon or any other search, you can find that there are myriad resources. The ones that I listed here, I like because, again, they include evidence-based information written by mental health professionals, and also some websites that have information not just on their personal website, but also have really good links with information on a variety of topics to other professional organizations as well. So I'm happy to take any more questions if there are any at this time.
Oh, wonderful. I am back again. Seems like we have some questions that are here. One thing that I did want to ask while I'm searching for the questions is what is the impact, Christina, on social distancing and youth? Because we're so used to, it's spring, it's time for graduation, the kids are outside playing on the playgrounds. Will this have, or do we know, will this have a long-term effect on just a generation?
That is an outstanding question, and to be honest with you, it's one that I've thought about a lot. Even having a son who's 2 years old and who's used to going to daycare and who's asking for his teachers and his friends, and seeing the impact on children as young as 2. And I know that we're not, alone in that and feeling that way and observing that in our very young children. I think long term, we have to wait to see what the medical advice is going to be, because we have to be able to answer those questions again with that concise, factual information. So right now we have some deadlines in place. Most children understand that school, for most places, is suspended indefinitely for the rest of the school year. So they're preparing emotionally for the fact that they may not see their friends until sometime in late June or July. But again, that might shift. And I think as parents, it involves us staying on top of what the current medical advice is and explaining to our children that for now we have these dates and deadlines, but it may expand. But to answer your question about the long-term impact, there's a lot of wonderful research that just speaks to how resilient children are. And I tend to kind of think about this a bit more optimistically, in the sense that, in the same way kids can come back from a 3-month summer break and just get right back into the routine of school, I strongly suspect that's what we're going to see here. And that's encouraging and emphasizing to them when they start to worry about this. I'm not sure we know what to expect, what to entirely expect yet with the adjustment, but it will involve a lot of reinsurance. And it will involve a lot of helping us to structure, appropriate ways for them to interact with their friends, given whatever the medical advice of the time is.
Yeah, because that's the one thing that I have been thinking about in my mind is, I see some young children wanting to go over to the park because they're used to it. And and as a parent, you think, oh my God, germs, no, the park, no. And you wonder what kind of message, like your reaction to that request from kids, because it should be, that's a safe place.
Yes.
And I know in talking with friends, they have children that are under 5, and it's, and what is that kind of, I'm feeling that response shouldn't be necessarily what we should be, how we should, or how should we respond when we see a park and our kids want to go to that?
Yeah. Again, that is a great question. It's something we're experiencing pretty much daily over here as well. And so look,
Yeah.
how you're going to explain that to a 2-year-old versus a 5-year-old with our children who are in that sort of pre-K, lower elementary age group. A good way to talk to them about it is to first validate and to say, I know that you really want to go to the park, and there's going to be a time really soon when we're going to be able to do that. Right now, though, we're going to really listen to the advice from the doctors, which is that right now we just kind of want to hang out just as a family and not really go play with that playground equipment, and then emphasize the positive. But there will be a time when we can go back to do those sorts of activities, and all the playground equipment is still going to be there, and it's going to be clean and new.
Oh, so I like that.
For our very young children, 2, 3, 4 or so, who are also, just beginning to speak and are saying like playground, want to play, or things like that. Just kind of saying things like, oh, another time, and then shifting, just distracting towards another activity. So perhaps you're not going to the playground, but they're able to run around a large open field, and you bring a ball or an activity that can distract them. Because as we all know, as distractions tend to work.
Yes.
They don't need the explanations, they just need the distractions.
And I think one thing that's interesting that our community is doing for this weekend is we know that we're practicing social distancing. We want to get out of the house, but do it in a safe way. So they've set up where people throughout the community can put teddy bears in their windows.
Yeah.
And then you do a teddy bear scavenger hunt. We're trying to do things that as a community that's safe. You stay in your car and you find, and then that way it's still something that is different that you can do as a family that gets you away from the computer and the work and the worry and anxiety that we all have.
I think we've seen so many communities, rise to the moment here and start to implement stuff like that for kids. And in that way, it's a novel, fun experience for them, and you can focus on that as well. Like, these are the kinds of things we're going to do for now, and there will be a day when you can do play dates again. But for right now, we're going to do these sorts of activities.
And this is a short, like, if you set expectations and say, this isn't our new normal, this will change. It's, we're still working that through, but there's a future.
Yes. This is just for now, so that everybody can stay safe and healthy, so that we can all see each other as soon as possible.
And another thought that I had for people that are running their business or people that are juggling, I'm finding that, and I know we talked about this a bit earlier, but I'm finding that it's really tough for me to build time in during the day.
Yes.
And so would you recommend, because I find that I'm actually working more because I have all these amazing tools. There's Zoom, there's, Microsoft Teams, there's Amazon's product. So we're all still connected, but what I'm finding now is I don't get that alone time. So what can you say to a business person or someone that's in the work field? What can they do?
So there's the practical answer and then the hopeful answer I have for this one, because the practical side of things, and I've certainly experienced this, again, as a small business owner in Arlington and trying to navigate everything that's happening, is that we really right now, I know, need to prioritize keeping ourselves afloat and starting to get that information. And what I would suggest doing, and something I've seen be very effective for people that I work with, is, again, emphasizing to yourself the temporary nature of this and putting very short-term goals in place. So saying to yourself, for example, right now, I may only be able to take 3 to 5 minutes for myself at the end of the day, which I do believe we can all do for the most part. Right? And then right now is the time to kind of triage and deal with the issues as they come up. And I'm just going to know that as daily I'm meeting these new goals and getting these questions answered, the time that I will have for myself, to unwind or to focus on self-care will increase as I answer these questions. So be aware that, we're all in triage mode. We are still very much in fight or flight. So right now, again, try to take those moments or those minutes when and where you can. And then just know that as you begin to answer all these questions and get things in place and structures in place, you will have more time to devote to yourself.
And once that, like, if we're in this, we know we're in this definitely through April 30th, and then you see projections through June, and there are questions about August. Will things start to feel like, will we pick up like a natural, will things slow down and we just start dealing with these in a natural way? Does it become more normal at a certain time?
So I think that's a question that we all have. And because, again, this is an unprecedented situation that we're all confronting for the first time, mental health professionals included, it's such an interesting thing. We're going through it at the same time as our patients are, that I don't have a definite answer there. But what I can say is that as those timelines begin to be revealed, right, through the federal government, through local government, and we're staying on top of when it looks like we're going to start to be able to get back to normal, a good thing to start doing for yourself and also for your family is preparing for that. And so I'm thinking about, well, what is that going to look like? Listening to the medical advice, if the suggestions are to go out in public, but only to essential places potentially, and then starting to slowly integrate and practice doing that, and then setting some time later, you know, down the road, to start doing more of the social activities, and just having constant communication and conversation with yourself and your family about what that might look like, emphasizing that it may shift, but that we have maybe a tentative template of what it might look like in place
in the future. And one of my other probably last question, because I'm just so you know, we're working with a lot of businesses, a lot of small businesses that are in very dire straits, where they're worried about being able to pay the lease or pay their workers. And so there's this extreme pressure that a lot of people are feeling. And some of the clients that I've been talking to just really want someone that they can speak to about it, to help them clear their mind so that they can come up with a strategy. What would you recommend to someone that's in a very highly pressured moment in time? What are some of the things that they can do to help them cope?
So I think that's a great question, because it gets back to that whole concept of, as much as we want to be rushing into our new situation with telework and trying to figure everything out, if we are not in a position where we can do that as optimally or functionally as we previously could have, we do have to put that self-care practice in place for ourselves first. And that may involve perhaps reaching out to a mental health professional or an executive coach, or a coach through, you know, Arlington Economic Development, to help talk through, get some guidelines about the concrete supports and solutions that are out there for small business owners, so that you can begin to organize all the worries, again, identify what aspects are in your control, and then start to do those things that I know you folks have been discussing, like applying for grants and loans and things of that nature, because that can also afford you some immediate reassurance that though this is not ideal, there are opportunities to stay afloat, and, you know, also be addressing at the same time your own anxiety levels, so that you can even engage in that process of seeking out what those supports and strategies are for you.
Oh, that sounds, because then it's like you're regaining control over a situation that feels that you have no control over.
Yes, exactly. And you're and understanding, and I think the key word here is accepting, right? The acceptance that the way that you're working right now might not be actually engaging in the traditional aspects of your work. Your full-time job might be right now just investigating and implementing the supports and structures that you need to stay afloat, to stay in business.
Okay.
All while emphasizing the need to engage in self-care as well.
That sounds spot on. Thank you for that. And we do have some audience questions that were here. I was missing them. This is a question that we received. What advice would you give for people who are experiencing unemployment due to the virus?
So from a mental health perspective, and I'm going to answer it first and foremost from that perspective, would be to, again, put some support in place for yourself immediately. Unemployment is, and the sudden and shocking way that a lot of individuals went into unemployment, literally overnight, right?
Yes.
It's different from that, you know, kind of having some notice or having an opportunity to plan. You are in full fight or flight mode. So the first thing do is to reach out and to get mental health support in place for yourself. So you can do that by, again, reaching out to any number of therapists, also reaching out to your insurance, or to the county to see what services are available for you pro bono to support you. And from there, taking care of yourself first, and from there, then starting to engage in everything we were just talking about. Begin to reach out to the teams at Arlington, the teams, within Virginia, the federal government, to understand what supports are offered to you at this time.
Because it seems like there's a lot of things that are out there.
There are, and even trying to navigate it and understand it can be stressful.
Yes.
So I think to start is within the community that your business operates, because those responses seem to be, from my understanding, coming a bit quicker than those at the levels. And so exploring that first, and then going from there.
Oh,
but
great.
Definitely taking it there.
And then we have another question. How would you suggest talking to older adults about not taking social distancing seriously?
Oh, that is a great question.
Wow.
Because a lot of the questions that I've been getting are, how do you talk to younger folks about not taking it seriously? So a lot of what I've been hearing from patients and from just people in my life is that grandparents still want to try to see grandkids. People feel guilty about saying no, don't come over.
Yes.
That sort of thing. I think right now, because of the unprecedented situation that we are in, the best advice I have is to be assertive, which means that you can be polite, but also direct at the same time. So somebody you care about in your life, in your family, who's not taking it seriously, now would be a good time to have a caring but also direct conversation about the risk they're putting themselves at and potentially other people. And I think we're getting some pushback. I'm not sure if this is what's happening with the individual who asked the question, but something I'm certainly is that there's some pushback sometimes. Well, I want to visit. We haven't seen, we've been home for 2 weeks. We're okay. Just emphasizing that we are all in this for the long term, and that all of our long-term goals are for all of us to stay healthy and well, and that there will be times for us to have that together time, but right now is just not the time for that. And instead to maybe do things like Zoom or Skype meetings with, those folks in our lives.
Because I think that if we emphasize, and from all that I'm gathering from today's webinar, is if we're very clear, we're nice and kind to each other, we take moments out for ourselves, but then also be really honest and say, hey, when we get on the back end of this, we're going to have a big old party.
Yes, exactly. Emphasizing that it's temporary, that those times and those moments are coming. But right now, in order to have those times and to have those moments, we all have to be following the advice from the medical professionals, which is to stay home as much as possible, to engage in social distancing, and wait for the go ahead for when that time is.
And I love your emphasis too about the telehealth being available, that people can take advantage of that so that they can seek out, if you feel that you need a third person to speak with, that there is that opportunity. Because I think some people may not realize that that is where a lot of the medical professionals have shifted to.
Yes.
For the safety of everybody.
Yes, absolutely. And most mental health professionals have been deemed essential workers and are still, operational and in practice, and have switched over to HIPAA compliant video conferencing platforms. And so we do have these structures in place to still support people.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's awesome. And thank you for that. I think I don't have any more questions. And Christina, I really want to thank you for this information. It is very much needed. I think as a society or community, we don't always talk about how we're feeling. We talk about like things that are kind of out there, but to me, you have to, in order to be able to cope with anxiety, you have to be able to come up with a plan so that you can move forward and not be stagnant in one place. And so thank you so much for your messaging on this. And we really appreciate you helping out the community during this really tough time.
Well, thanks so much, Tara. I'm so honored and privileged to be part of this community, and everybody stay healthy, to stay well, to take good care of yourselves, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, but really put those supports in place for yourself that you need to be supported at this time.
Thank you so much. And thank you all out there in webinar land. We'll be doing more of this. Christina's agreed to come back at a later date, and we really appreciate it. We appreciate all of you. We wish you all the very best, and be safe, be healthy, and remember to reach out if you need any help whatsoever. Thank you all. We'll get through this together.
Bye,
Have
everyone.
a good day. Take care.